Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and things look a little different, don't they? Just trying something new. For the most part, it's still the same setup. It's just, different glasses. Might not always be these glasses. In any case, this is I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse. And this week, I am talking about a show, specifically just the pilot episodes, or the first few episodes. I don't think it's considered a pilot, but for the most part, this was shown as a movie when it first aired. It's the first 3 episodes. It's for one of the best shows of all time, as far as I'm concerned, and that is Samurai Jack. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. Samurai Jack. It's one of the best Cartoon Network shows ever. Cartoon Network is a channel that was filled with great show after great show. You got the Powerpuff Girls, you got Ed, Edd n Eddy, Dexter's Lab, so many classic cartoons. But if there's any that I think deserves the title as best, it's easily Samurai Jack. And if you've seen the show, you know why. It's got great action. The comedy was always funny. Despite it being a serious show, the comedy is just well done on it. You got great performances out of the leads. Specifically, you have Phil Lamar as Samurai Jack, and then the villain of the show, Aku, voiced by the late Amako. Other than that, you'd have a rotating cast of characters, and the whole show was pretty much, here's a samurai that's wandering around, essentially getting into misadventures, solving problems, or just sometimes getting into more comedic storylines, all as he's looking for the great evil Aku, or more specifically, he's looking for a way back to his time because he's been flung into the far future. As the intro states, basically, Aku is much more powerful. He's got more power behind him, everything. So, yeah, that's the general idea behind Samurai Jack. This pilot, I keep using pilot, but that's not the right term. But the first few episodes of this show pretty much set this up. The first episode is what essentially is okay, here's Jack in his own timeline before he gets thrown into the future. The second episode is him thrown into the future and getting the name Jack because his name is not actually Jack. I don't think we actually ever learned his actual name, if I remember correctly. And then the last episode is just to tie it all up. Again, this was shown as a TV movie back when it first released, but now that I have it on Blu-ray, it is split up into 3 episodes, which I don't really like. I prefer when it's shown as it was originally, when I can watch it as it's originally shown. I know that this is technically how it is, because it is considered chapters 1 to 3. You'll notice that every episode that comes out on it, when it ends, it says the number of what it's supposed to be in the order. Even though this is not a show that I would say is very, it's focused on a story, but until that final season that was done on Adult Swim years after the fact, for the most part, the show is pretty much just, here's a list of random adventures, which is the way I would have preferred it, honestly, and I'm glad that that's the way the show was done, because it is much more entertaining when the show is pretty much look, we're just gonna allow this thing to breathe and grow and be itself over trying to create this ongoing story arc of this is building up to that final episode. Because the problem with that is that it doesn't allow for a lot of the side adventures that was so great about the show. There's an episode later on where Aku, noticing the kids are now looking up to Samurai Jack, decides to get a bunch of them and tell them a bunch of stories. And it's just a funny and weird concept for an episode, but it can only exist in the way that this show was done. If this was done as a big ongoing story arc, you wouldn't get silly episodes like that, and it would be a shame. So I like the fact that they do it like this, especially because it allows for more freedom. It just makes the show feel more, I would honestly argue, even more timeless, because it pretty much makes the show it makes it clear that this is just a show about a wandering samurai, and the main thing about it, the thing that you see in the opening, is just a setup for it, to do it. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of like something like Mad Max, where these are all just legends being passed around. Only difference is that it's clear that this is all supposed to be real, and plus it just makes it more impactful in that final season when Gendy was brought back. And by the way, this was made by Gendy Tartakovsky, guy who made Hotel Transylvania, Dexter's Lab, awesome dude. When he was brought back to do the final season to wrap it up, he of course had multiple episodes where it showcases like this is all the good stuff that Jack has done to basically show another character who Jack truly is. Aside from the fact that it's great for nostalgia because it's like I remember that episode. It really makes it hit harder. Like yeah, this guy did do a lot of good, and it works in the show's favor in that way. So that stuff is great. But going back to these first 3 episodes, like I said, the first episode is essentially here's Aku returning to the Earth because it's pretty much told right away, like, okay, Jack's father actually fought Aku once and sealed him within the Earth. But Aku is now back. Aku, of course, takes revenge. Jack's mother takes him, and basically it's this nice, great montage of showing how he's being trained by people all over the world. They're essentially all coming together knowing like, okay, this guy's gonna be the one who defeats Aku, so we're training him in all these different art styles, and fighting styles, pretty much showing him how to use different weapons and all this stuff, pretty much creating the ultimate warrior. It's great because it's all done in silence, so you literally get a lot of story going through just the visuals alone. This goes on until Jack is, of course, an adult. He goes off to fight Aku, finds his father, rescues him, but is like, okay, we gotta go do this. He goes off to fight Aku. Neat fighting, but Aku, being evil, right as he's losing, decides to pull off one more trick, which is sending him off to the future, setting up the basis of the show. Great stuff. Second episode, like I said, you see him in the future. He's trying to process everything that's going on. He's not aware that he's in the future. He thinks he's in another world or dimension or something. After doing, I wouldn't say stunts, but pretty much like he pretty much falls on some flying cars, jumps from one to another, takes some out that are trying to hurt him, and eventually lands perfectly on the ground. Some spectators who are amazed by this call him Jack. They kind of clue him in with saying like, yeah, Aku rules this place. Jack goes into what's essentially a nightclub and stumbles upon these talking dogs and learns that yes, it is Earth. Things have changed because it's been thousands of years. There's now a lot of alien species that Aku has worked with previously roaming around the Earth, which has made it into a completely different place. It's much more evil because you got a bunch of horrible people running around and it's all a mess. So of course Jack is all confused by this. The dogs want to hire Jack to basically stop Aku's minions from preventing them from learning more about their past because they're architects, and that's where pretty much episode 2 ends, where you're getting ready for the big battle. The third episode, that's the big battle. It's the big climax of this whole storyline where Jack, alongside with the dogs, but mostly Jack, are fighting against a bunch of Aku's robots. Of course, Jack eventually wins, and Aku, now fully aware of Jack's presence in his timeline, is pretty much just there to remind you, like, okay, well, Jack may be roaming around, but my power is all great, so this is going to be a much harder journey than he expects. Like, he'll try to find his way back, but it's not going to be an easy cakewalk, and, even his encounters with Aku will not be as simple as his first encounter because his power has grown even more. Very simple setup. As a 3-part movie, it works best, I think. Like I said, it's, you split it up into episodes. Yeah, you can watch it that way, but since each episode leads into each other, it just feels like the story ends properly once you get to that third one. So I don't really recommend watching this one at a time. I would recommend sitting down, watching it all together, just to get a good perspective on it. especially because the coolest thing about the third one is that when it ends, it pretty much transitions into what often is the shot that you see when it goes into the credits. I don't know. It's definitely the way that I would have presented it, and I wish that the Blu-ray had the option of presenting it that way instead of having it split up, or at least giving you both options. Now, if you remember weeks back, months ago, I did an episode for a Japanese movie called The Little Prince. That's not the full title, but we're keeping it short for this. And if you may remember, the animation style in it is kind of like this, and that's because, yeah, that was one of the major influences to this show. And yeah, I love the animation style. I mean, again, it was great there, but it really does shine in this show. Um, you'll see a bunch of greater stuff as the show progresses, but for this first episode, they really knock it out of the park, and it really gives you an idea of what the show's going to be like. Which is one thing that I really like about this is that, if you look at a lot of older shows that had similar things where they had like multi-part, like whether it was 2 to 3 part intro episodes, you would notice that they would have some better animation in those intro episodes than they would in the rest of the show. For this, I would say it's pretty much consistent throughout. But there's a lot of great stuff in here. Like there's at times where the aspect ratio kind of changes. It never really goes into widescreen, but it does kind of give that effect to it, just to really highlight like how intense some moments are. It's just impressive stuff. It's some of the best animation that I've ever seen for a TV show. The lighting, the coloring, it's all just impressive stuff. And I do like that the show never really holds back from looking as cool as it does. One of the things that the show, of course, is I guess infamous for is that there's a lot of, I would say kills, but pretty much like there's a lot of times where you see Jack basically destroy robots using his sword. And the reason for that is because, of course, there's only so much you can get away with a Y7 rating. This was not at the time where Cartoon Network was openly doing PG shows for kids. So it's like, okay, how do we get around it? Let's make it robots so that, whenever he's killing, it's not actual people or living beings. As a result, you get a lot of scenes where just oil is splashing around because it's supposed to be blood, but it's robots, so we get around it. And you'd think that would get tiresome or make it annoying, but it always looks cool, honestly. And of course, it's just filled with great designs. Like just this episode alone, you get, of course, the robot beetle opponents that would prop up every now and then. But I would say, for as an intro enemy, they were really fun to look at, especially in this whole setting of like this dog excavation site. Of course, the dogs are adorable, and I like the fact that it's never really explained why the dogs have become smarter or anything. It's just like, well, this is kind of just what happened after thousands of years, and a bunch of stuff, changed the world. Aku, of course, is a deliciously evil bad guy. Like, he's cruel. He's funny, but he's also endlessly cruel. Like, you get a scene where these the species of people are coming in basically saying like, hey, look, your world is the only one that has, any kind of water for us to survive off of now. Aku reveals like, well, yeah, because you come from a planet where I took the water from. So yeah, of course, you had to come here. And they're like, okay, well, we'll do anything to be able to live in your water. So he's like, okay, well, just create monuments off of me, and you can live in my place. And I just love that. It's like the fact that he just stole the water and essentially still allows the people who originally came from that to live in Earth, just to basically be like, okay, well, now you got to work for me. So the show does have a lot of personality to it beyond just being style, and that's just why it's so great. This is a show that was filled with like I said, intense moments, but would always come back to just having funny moments. And the villain was just great because he was both intimidating but also funny. There's a lot of episodes where Aku is just like, it almost feels like he's the butt of the joke, but at the same time, you always kind of remember, like, well, yeah, but this guy has a lot of power and he can do a lot of things. He's willing to kill easily, or in some cases, like in this episode, like when it comes to those people, one of them speaks up and he pretty much just zaps him with his eyes, and it's just mentioned that he's like been sent to some other place. I don't think they often go with that excuse when it comes to him zapping someone, but I just think that's funny. But yeah, just an incredible show. Jack is a great lead, whether he's silent or, of course, when he's talking. And yeah, Phil Lamar just knocks it out of the park being Jack. I know, some people might question, like, well, you got a black man voicing a Japanese character. And I mean, I can't speak for them, but I feel like everyone is cool with it regardless. I've never heard anyone complain about that. So as far as I'm concerned, this is one of those scenarios where it's all alright. You, of course, have Mako voicing Aku. Again, just a perfect performance. Eventually, when they got back to the 5th season, they had to replace him because Mako had sadly passed away. But I do think that once we get to that, we still get a good replacement with Greg Baldwin, who also took over for Uncle Iroh, a role he played for Avatar: The Last Airbender, which, look, I'm going to be upfront, I'm not the biggest fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender, so it's no surprise that I lean towards this show when it comes to Cartoon Network versus Nickelodeon. But, I mean, it still just impresses me that when it comes to, like, the big, serious adventure shows, that, one recurring element between both of them was Mako. And you can see how his talent really goes through both shows. Animation-wise, this one's definitely better. But, it is definitely a fun show. As an intro, this was kick-ass. I remember watching it as a kid, being impressed by it, and just being excited for when the show would actually start. And every episode was always gripping because it'd be like, okay, is this going to be the one where he finally interacts with Aku again? And eventually, when of course the show would continue, it became less about that and would just be like, okay, what is he going to do this week? And again, I just think that's the best way to go about it with a show like this. It's like, this is going to be essentially the legends of this wandering samurai. He has his own backstory, and it's the reason why he's wandering, but that's second to just the story of the week, and it's just great. I love it. This 3-parter perfectly sets that up by providing you the backstory to how he came to be, but then later just showcasing, like, okay, after he's caught up with everything that's going on, he's now helping out these dogs. They're not going to be recurring characters. They do eventually return, but again, they're not here to be like, okay, here's Jack's, sidekicks throughout the show. It's just to further the story of Jack, the wandering samurai. I love that. It's terrific stuff. Yeah, I don't know what else I could really say about this. Samurai Jack is an incredible show. You guys should watch it. The animation is top notch, and as far as I'm concerned, whether it's the action or the comedy, this show is perfect on it. So with all that out of the way, I just want to remind you that this is I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. This is your host, Octaviano Macias, saying thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again next time.
Do not worry, Samurai. You will see me again.
Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like and comment, ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast and give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/psycams. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you come back for more in the future.